Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you all. My name's Harry Palmer, and I'm the festival assistant for the London Handel Festival. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this session, so if you can make sure that your video is switched off and your microphone is also turned to mute, that would be great. We'll be posting it on YouTube afterwards and sending a link out in the next day or so. Just to quickly run through how this will work, I've got a couple of questions for Nathan and Ed that I'll run through, and then at the end, we'll turn over to a little Q&A session. So although you are on mute, we would love to hear from you in the chat box. Just let us know who you are, where you're from, which choir you're singing with, and any questions that you may have for Ed and Nathan. Just to remind you too, it's only 5 days till our Messiah Reimagined performance. I'm sure most of you are already booked in, but just to let you know, if you do go to our website and sign up through the event page, there'll be a downloadable program available later this week, which I do recommend you go to download. So for this evening, we're very excited to have two outstanding soloists join us, both soloists in the Messiah on the 5th, and also finalists of our Handel singing competition. They are tenor Nathan Vale and bass baritone Edward Grint. Just a quick introduction for both of them. Nathan attended the Royal College of Music and was awarded an independent opera vocal scholarship to the National Opera Studio. Ed studied at King's College, Cambridge, as chorus scholar, as well as the Britten Opera School at the College of Music as well. So guys, both of you have been involved in the London Handel Festival for many years, ever since your success in the singing competition. Can you tell us a little more about this? Nathan, maybe let's start with you.
Yes, absolutely. Well, actually, my first involvement with the London Handel Society and the festival was actually quite a bit before my involvement with the competition. It was back in 2002 when I sang as part of the chorus in the Brock's Passion, which we were performing at the Royal College of Music, and I was a first-year undergraduate at the time. And the performance was, we were performing the piece in English, and it was Dennis Darlow's edition, who was also conducting the performances. And it was an amazing experience, actually. I remember because for a few reasons. The first being that it was my first time performing with a period orchestra. And as a student, that was a real sort of eye-opener, because the sound is completely different to that of a symphony orchestra, say. But also to have the opportunity to be on stage performing Handel opera was exciting, but also to watch and learn from other performers, so people who are sort of older than me performing. And there was certainly one thing that I remember very, very clearly, which is an aria that Peter sings, which in German it would be Schau ich fall im strenge Busse, I believe. And it was, at the time, the Peter was being performed by Andrew Kennedy, who's a tenor who actually, I believe, won the first Handel singing competition. I may be wrong. I think he may have been the first winner, but he certainly did win the competition at some point. And it was, I just remember it being fantastic. It was just so powerful. It's the moment when Peter, I believe, is he's sort of repenting, and it's just, Handel writes so well for the voice, and he really sort of paints the picture so well of the sort of grief that he's feeling at that point. And it was that experience that really sort of got me more interested in Handel. And I started performing a lot of learning a lot of Handel's arias. And it was after that I then applied for the Handel singing competition. So it was really that experience that inspired me. And since then, I've been lucky enough to be involved with the Handel Festival for pretty much every year, and it really has been sort of, there have been some wonderful experiences along the way.
Fantastic. And I suppose your point about performing with the Baroque orchestra is quite interesting. Last week we had another chat with the London Handel Orchestra, who gave us some examples of the differences between Baroque orchestra and a regular orchestra, which is really interesting. Ed, how about you?
I first was connected with the Handel Festival back in 2010, which would have been when I was studying at the Royal College of Music. And I'm sure many of the people on this call know, every spring, certainly up for the last few years, the Handel Festival, and Lawrence Cummings in particular, came to the Royal College of Music and performed fully rehearsed, fully staged Handel operas. So in the 3 years that I was studying at college, we performed Il Pastorfido, Rodelinda, and Riccardo Primo, all of which were such seminal works. I'd never really performed a full opera before, let alone a full Handel opera. So the chance to work with the creme de la creme of London's Handel musicians was a real treat. Working in close proximity with Lawrence Cummings for an entire term, daily rehearsals, daily coaching sessions on this fantastic music was extraordinary, a great privilege, one that I don't think I'd even quite taken on board before I started my studies at the college. So having a chance to do 3 operas, and then similarly to Nathan, I applied to the Handel competition a couple of years after leaving college, and I felt like I was already known by a lot of the players who were playing in the final with me. Obviously I was known by Lawrence well already, and it was great to kind of feel like part of the family, and to then show my wares as a fully, as it were, qualified and graduated student. And since then, again, I've done concerts, I've done operas, I've done all sorts of bits and bobs with the Handel Festival, and it's a wonderful festival to be part of, and they're extremely loyal to their competition finalists, and it's a lovely thing to be part of.
Something, Harry, I'd add to that as well, is the wonderful thing about the Handel Society and also its connections with the colleges in London is that it gives young singers this opportunity to perform with this wonderful orchestra, but also, as Ed said, then they are very loyal to those singers, and so you see people that you performed with as a student who are still involved in the festival in some way 10 years down the line, and I think that's a fantastic thing, that they really do promote young singers and players at the beginning of their careers. I think it's really fantastic.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I'm a fairly new addition to the sort of administrative team, but one of the things I've noticed is how the festival has nurtured its talent, whether it's through singers who have been part of the competition. And I think that's really important, particularly for young singers who are starting out their career.
It's wonderful looking down the list of former finalists, which I think are all available on the Handel competition website. And so many of those people are still singing, still regularly singing early music, still, heavily involved in the profession. It's quite a list of people, really.
Yeah, it's very impressive. Just moving aside then from that at the moment, how's life in lockdown been for both of you? And have you managed to do much singing? Ed, maybe let's go with you for this one.
For the first part, it was an absolute disaster. I did no real qualitative singing between middle of March and about the end of August. I did a couple of tiny projects, as we were discovering how to become both singers and audio and self-made audio engineers. A friend of mine decided that he was going to produce a version of Happy Birthday. So I sang Happy Birthday in the opera style with 934 different names. So that took a week of my life, which I'll never get back, of just going, "Dear Abraham, dear Adam," and so on and so on and so on, while he was filtering all those in. Luckily, at the very end of August, I went out to France and sang for Bill Christie's Garden Festival, which he hosts every year in his garden near Nantes. And actually, from the end of August through to about the end of November, I was in reasonably regular work in that short period where the world looked like it was returning. Because a lot of my music is in the early music world, I particularly do a lot of madrigal singing at the moment with Les Arts Florissants and with Collegium Bacali Ghent. Those kind of concerts where there was only 5 or 6 people involved and we could all be spread 3 meters apart and still fit onto a normal stage. Those kind of concerts took place. So I was, we did a tour sort of a tour, 2 or 3 concerts really, of some madrigals in October, and we recorded a CD which has just been released. But yeah, that was kind of it. I rehearsed an opera out in Heidelberg in Germany, but we never got to perform it. We did a videoed performance, and then the whole project had to be binned because everything went back into lockdown, and that was the end of November. So I had a sort of glory 3 months. Well, in normal times it would have been entirely normal, but it felt like the most glorious bit of music making I'd ever done, having spent 5 months not making anything at all.
Yeah, it makes you realize how much you miss it, and also you need that ability.
Absolutely. Standing, and at the end of August at Bill's Festival, we did some performances of Bach cantatas, including 106, which has this extraordinary bass aria, in Paradis, where there's lots of top Gs as well as bottom Zs, and it's all over the place. It's a completely extraordinary piece of music, and we performed it at night because we had to perform everything outside so that everybody could be far apart and all, under all these restrictions. So it got to 10 o'clock at night and we suddenly were singing Bach out in the open air in this beautiful French countryside with a proper fantastic band and a small company of singers, and it felt extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. I've never experienced music making like it, having had so many quiet months and really not particularly enjoying the world of listening to music on a screen. To suddenly be in person making music in these beautiful surroundings, it was so moving.
Yeah, because there was so much uncertainty of when performances would happen again. I mean, Nathan, how did you cope? What did you get up to?
Well, like Ed, for the first few months I really did no singing at all. It was like all musicians. I mean, when the pandemic hit, I lost all of my work going forward. So that was, you sort of deal with that in a way that you think, okay, well, I won't be singing, I won't be performing, so actually I'm just not going to do any singing at all for a few months. And actually, in a way, that was something that I quite enjoyed, because I spent some time doing something, doing things that were completely unrelated to music. And whilst I didn't miss it, I was actually quite grateful for that little bit of time where I actually just did other things, and then I sort of took my mind off music for a while, because sometimes we can be so busy that we forget to actually sort of enjoy it as well. I mean, of course, we always enjoy performing, but we can be so busy that we're sort of almost feel like we're on a treadmill. And it was nice to have that time. Having said that, that feeling quickly sort of, disappeared. And I looked at the snowstorm that was my diary. But actually, I mean, I've sort of managed to do other things. As we were saying earlier before we came on the call, my wife and I moved into a new house, so we've had plenty of things to be getting on with that. There were plenty of work that needed doing. I've become rather good at DIY, which is something that I never thought I'd hear myself say. So that's been nice. But I did manage to get some singing in between lockdowns, and like Ed was saying, that was a pretty wonderful feeling, actually, to be back out there performing, and to be sort of feel like, actually, yes, this is I know exactly why I do this for a living. And it's the feeling that you have yourself when you're performing, but it's also the feeling that there can't be, the atmosphere that can't be replicated other than being in the room with an audience. that feeling, the atmosphere that creates is, it's fantastic, and we're very lucky to be able to do that. And I'm sure that when we're the other side of this, that's something that will happen again, and I think people will be really keen for that to happen.
Yeah, with hope. I mean, it's something that can't really be matched. So,
no.
I think fingers crossed, when everything reopens, people are going to be clawing the walls to be able to come and see some live music. I mean, with that in mind, if we move on to perhaps talking about the Messiah, I mean, you are performing that on Monday. Just in terms of the Messiah as a piece, it's nearly 300 years old. Why do you think it's so popular? Why do you think it's stood the test of time in such an impressive way? Nathan, let's go back to you.
Well, I think there are a number of reasons for it. I think the fact that, well, first of all, Handel really knew how to write a good tune. And I always feel like it's a bit like, now this is a bit of a sort of, I won't say it's a sort of cheap comparison, but I always feel like it's like listening to the favorite album of your favorite band. It's like you always you think the Messiah, and but then you hear another movement and think, oh yeah, this one's really good as well, and you just keep going through it, and number after number, it's just really, really good. For instance, there's a moment which, the beginning of part 3, when the soprano, you have all these wonderful choruses and arias in part 2, which I'm sure we'll talk about shortly. But you get to part 3 and you think, oh well, we're just finishing off now, as it were, And then the soprano comes in with "I Know That My Redeemer Liveth," which is just one of the most beautiful arias. It's just stunning. So I think it's the fact that it's just number after number, but also Handel had this wonderful ability to really hook into your soul. So you really connected emotionally with the music. So the fact that the Messiah is, you have the birth of Jesus, the death of Jesus, but also then the resurrection. He has this wonderful ability to really make you sort of feel what's going on. So that the torment of Jesus in part 2, you really feel that, but also, I think it's that. I think it's the fact that you, by the end of the piece, you feel like you've been on this real emotional journey, but then there's this wonderful release by the end of it. I think it's fantastic.
Very satisfying. And Ed, how about you?
It seems to me to be one of those extraordinary epics where, for a start, there's no bad movement. Every single time one does a performance of this, there's always a discussion before it takes place along, which bit should we cut? Maybe the soprano doesn't really want to sing that aria, the tenor doesn't want to sing this aria, whatever. And there's always somebody in the room who goes, "You can't cut that bit. That's my favourite bit." And it's true that it's one of those pieces where it is extraordinary, and there are moments where it really speaks to every single person. Be you in a kind of Christmassy mood and want all that stuff from the beginning, and those amazing soprano recits which lead bang 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 into "Glory to God" and the trumpets come, or if you're somebody that wants something great and triumphant like the Hallelujah chorus, or you're feeling sad and you want "He Was Despised," or whatever it might be. It's there's always something, and the piece never stops giving. So for me, it's that, and there aren't very many pieces like that in the world. Where every single piece is a winner. There's often some dull bit. Even think of some of Handel's operas. He was amazing for writing all this stuff that was so popular, and clearly, he was a German writing Italian opera because Italian opera was popular, and then he came to Britain and wrote the Messiah because he could sort of see a niche in the market, and yet he managed to pick up glory moments all the time. And in this extraordinary piece, which there's so many kind of wonderful bits of history and folklore surrounding the Messiah, which is maybe why it's become so enduring. But the fact that he wrote it all in a couple of weeks is amazing. And how it stood this test of time and been written so quickly. And then the fact that there's all these little moments in it, like, you know, do we stand up for the Hallelujah chorus, that kind of thing. And it's one of the weird bits of music info that people who know nothing about music somehow know, because it's become so famous. And it's like Nathan said, with it being the album from your best band, it's, you know, whenever your favourite band releases a new track, you kind of think, oh, maybe I should try the new one. But what you always come back to is the thing that's your heart and soul and why you got into the band in the first place. And that's like that with Handel's Messiah. You know, every single choral society in the land will try something new this term. Let's try and do something a bit wacky. But every single Christmas, everybody kind of goes, you know what, let's just do Handel's Messiah because we love it, they love it. It's timeless.
Yeah. And also, Harry, I was going to say, quite like saying, I mean, there are so many Handel operas, and you could say that not every aria in every Handel opera is as amazing as the arias you would find in the Messiah. And you have to wonder whether, because his popularity was really waning at the time of him writing the Messiah, whether he was writing this sort of, you know, his way of sort of reinventing, you know, it was a sort of it's almost like an artist who is down on their luck, and, you know, the bank managers on the phone, you know, so they really have this urgency to write something really good. And I think you really see that in the Messiah. But also it's the fact that you can perform it pretty much any time of the year, you know. And I know it was a piece that was performed really, it was supposed to be performed at Lent, during the Lent period, but actually, you know, it then became very popular to perform a piece at Christmas time, because you have, you know, the three parts, you know, and also the fact that it was written, you know, with an English text, which makes it much more approachable, you know, for many countries around the world, you know. So I think that's probably why it's remained popular as well.
And it's so international. I mean, some of the singers that we've had sign up in our chorus have been from, you know, places like Panama and countries that you wouldn't think would sing music like the Messiah. Wow. It seems everyone knows it.
Yeah.
Particularly something like the Hallelujah chorus, which I'd probably bet at least 99.9% of the population on Earth would know if they hear Hallelujah.
Absolutely.
I mean, that again,
there are kids' choruses involved is so brilliant. I remember, you know, experiencing a bit of Handel. I think we did part 2 or part 1 when I was at school, and, you know, what a brilliant opportunity to be part of something at that stage. And because it's, you know, because it's so timeless, it's the gift that's kept on giving. Certainly for me, you know, I would have sung my first performance of Messiah when I was, I don't know, 11 or something, and I'm still singing it regularly today, you know, 20-something years later.
And that's always important, because for particularly young children getting into music, classical music in particular, it's, you know, Messiah is a great way into that because it's accessible for them as well. I mean, in terms of your favorite movement then from the Messiah, or favorite piece, I'm going to split this into 2 sections, because I want to know what your favorite piece or movement or section is. But if it's one of your own arias, so either a tenor or bass aria, you then have to tell me another piece that you like from it.
There are other pieces in it.
Yeah.
I have to say that my favourite piece is the Trumpet Shall Sound, which I know sounds very kind of...
Of course.
Yeah, exactly. Of course I was going to say that. But for me, it's one of the great bass arias that's ever been written. It's so triumphant. It comes at the like most crucial part of the story. It feels like a glorious ending, and then there's still more to come. It's a joy to sing, and it's so incredible standing up, singing the beautifully constructed recitative that comes before it, where, you know, out of this silence, you start telling the audience the mystery. Behold, I tell you a mystery. And here's the story. Here is the actual crux of the story. You know, if there was anything that Christianity was ever based on, it was the fact that Christ rose from the dead, and here we are. This is it. This is it happening. So it's an amazing piece to sing, and every time you sing it, it kind of brings goosebumps. So then, what's my other bit that isn't my own song? I don't know. It probably has to be the very final chorus, because the Amen at the end is just one of the most extraordinary pieces of music ever written. So triumphant, so fitting at the end of a 3-hour epic piece to have this sort of 3 minutes of extraordinary glory, and everybody piles in. It starts very small, and it just builds and builds and builds, and then it gets small again, and the violins build and build, and then the trumpets are blaring and the drums blaring and the tenors sing a top A, and it's everybody's just, you can't help but applaud at the end. Even in our performance coming up on Monday, when there's going to be no audience there, and I suppose there will be sort of no applause, but I can guarantee you that everybody that's in that room will be bursting, and I'm sure that applause will be heard.
The quiet one, yeah. Nathan, how about you?
Well, I would have to agree that the final movement is my favourite movement. Well, actually, I don't have a favourite movement. I'd say it's one of my favourites, because it's just exhilarating. It's just exhilarating. And I have to say, I always feel a little bit sorry for the chorus when this movement comes around, because it's just so demanding, and they have to be really sort of, one has to be really careful, because I've sung the chorus quite a few times. You have to be very careful and pace yourself during this last movement, because there's so much of it, and it just requires, really sort of technically sound singing. But it's such a rewarding movement to sing as well. So that's one of my favourite movements. But actually, I think also I have to say "Rejoice Greatly" is one of my favourite arias in the piece, certainly, because it's just fantastic. It's just so, it's so sort of, you can't help but smile your way through that aria, and it's just fantastic. It's really good. But also, I have to say, Handel wasn't very kind to sopranos. The soprano sits there for the whole of the first part, and has to somehow keep their voice warm. I don't know, hum along or whatever, and then come in and sing these sort of these really quite difficult recits, which the last of which it finishes on a top A, so they're really at the top, towards the top of their voice, having sat there for a good half an hour or so, and then a very short chorus and straight into "Rejoice Greatly," which is fiendish. It's just absolutely, it's so difficult. But I'm always amazed at how sopranos manage to do it and just make it sound so easy. I'm always very glad not to be a soprano at that point in the piece, I have to say. Yeah. And then I would agree with Ed again. I'd say the trumpet is just fantastic. It's a real gift of an aria. But as a tenor, I'm always very jealous that we don't get to sing arias like that. The reason, there really isn't much that I've come across. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there are arias that are written for tenor and trumpet and tenor, but I think I've only sung one. So but he seems to write a lot of arias for bass and trumpet. So I'm always a bit jealous of that.
Yeah, he loves a bit of that. Great, amazing. Just going back to the audience, guys, if you do have any questions, make sure you pop the box for Ed and Nathan. Obviously we are focusing on the side because we've got the performance on the 5th, but I just want to know if there were any particular works by Handel other than the Messiah that resonated with you in particular. It could be a particular aria or piece, or it could be a work as a whole. Nathan, how about you?
One of the first pieces I sang actually was Dixit Dominus, and purely because of its difficulty, I was singing in the choir, and it's just an amazing piece, which again he wrote when he was very young, I understand, and it's just masterful. It's incredible that someone of that age could write a piece like Dixit Dominus. And for anyone who's sung the choral movement from Dixit Dominus. I mean, you'll know it's really some of his most difficult choral writing. You know, but for that reason, it's also some of the most rewarding to sing. Also, I'm a huge fan of Acis and Galatea because it's just beautiful, and it's a sort of pocket-sized opera, if you like, you know, perfectly formed, with some really stunning. Again, some of the choral writing in that is just actually, I think that's actually some of my favourite. Those are some of my favourite movements in the piece. Actually, I mean, really stunning. So yes, those two pieces certainly spring to mind, but obviously the operas as well. I mean, Aliodante is just fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So exciting, and yeah.
Ed, how about
I was
you?
going to say Aces of Galatea as well. It's been one of the pieces that has come up so frequently in my career over the last 10 years or so. Be those concert performances, fully staged operas, including a full staging a couple of years ago for the Handel Festival. And in fact, I'm doing another one, you know, everything crossed, for the Buxton Festival this summer, which again would be lovely to work with some old friends that I know through the Handel Festival, like Nick Pritchard and Anna Dennis. Get the tickets now. It's a stunning piece of music, amazingly well written, another beautiful story that again resonates with everybody. And as Nathan says, a perfect pocket-sized kind of piece, 90 minutes of an opera rather than signing yourself up for a 3-hour epic journey. But the other thing, which I didn't particularly know this piece until 2 years ago when I performed it with Handel Festival and Adrian Butterfield, was Handel's Italian version of the same piece, Arci Galatea Polypheme. And in the English, Acis and Galatea, Polyphemus is the small little character right in the middle. Obviously, he creates all the drama by, I shouldn't give the game away, but he kills Acis. In the Italian version, he has loads to do. So rather than just 2 arias and then disappear for the rest of the evening, there are something like 7 arias that Polyphemo gets to sing. And there's one, Fra l'ombre e gli orrori, that is possibly one of the most extraordinary pieces ever written in terms of its vocal demands. There's a written top A, so tenor territory top A, and a written sub D underneath the bottom of the bass stage, and they are next to each other on the score. So you have one quaver to jump from your top A down to your bottom D, and it's kind of brilliant. It's completely mad, and of course, this is Handel writing a vocal line of Polyphemus being mad and angry and insane. But what an extraordinary piece to do! And we sang it at the Wigmore Hall, and it was just working on it, spending a few months trying to figure out how on earth to sing this stuff, and then actually getting to do it was mind-blowing, completely brilliant. And to think of that being written by the same chap who wrote The Messiah, which seems so standard and so much part of the repertoire, to discover this extraordinary piece was brilliant, really brilliant. Man of many talents.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. We have a question from Samir Savant. Considering Handel's first language was not English, what do you think about the word painting in Messiah? Any particular good or bad moments to look out for? Ed, let's go back to you.
There's sort of it's a question that often comes up with Messiah. There are moments when you can tell that it's not his first language, and there's slight, oddities in the setting of the words. But I don't know. Perhaps it's because it's become so much part of the repertoire that these things don't seem to bother the average English speaker anymore. Yeah, I find it hard to say, really. I feel so closely affiliated to the text that I desperately don't want to say that he's done anything wrong, despite the strangeness of the occasional bits of his writing.
I mean, I have to say, I think he writes. I think he writes really, really well in English. In the sense that, I mean, even in, for instance, the tenor's first recit, "Comfort ye," the way he writes, "Comfort ye, comfort ye." I mean, it's beautiful. It's just perfect. You know, comforting my people. And the rough place is plain, the way he paints words. It's just, it's so sort of, it really has an understanding of how to write for the voice, but also to use the text. And then again, rejoice greatly. You know, or rather, no. So, for instance, every valley shall be exalted. The way he writes to the word exalt, and there's a sort of climbing phrase, and it just keeps on climbing. It's you know, it's fantastic, and it means that as you're singing those lines, you can't help but be taken along with that and really put the real sort of meaning behind those words, because it's all there on the page. You know, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I suppose it goes back to what was said earlier. You know, Handel was exceptional at writing for the voice, so in a way, a lot of his work is just, you know, easily done that way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You can tell that he had good singers around him all the time, which he clearly did. You know, whether they gave advice or whether they just, you know, he made them try things and discovered very quickly if it wasn't going to work. But you know, his average team of soloists were amazing. You know, some of Europe's finest singers, and they clearly did extraordinary things and extraordinary jobs. But also Handel was quick enough and able enough that if so and so wasn't able to make it for this performance, he would just rewrite the piece that would suit, you know, Mrs. What's-her-face better. And that's why there are so many versions of so many of the arias, because he would just think, well, John's singing tonight, he's not so good at that, but he's excellent at this.
But he also demanded that the singers were able to read he demanded good sight reading and, you know, good reading skills, and would really show his frustration if that wasn't the case. And was, you know, sort of swear in 3 different languages, you know, you know, and sort of voice his frustrations.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got another question here from Maurice. What are your pro tips for singing Handel? Can you give our Sing at Home chorus singers for the next version in December, as we're doing a performance again then, what is specifically important to look out for when singing Handel? It's a really good question.
I love singing Handel. I find it really speaks to me in terms of the music, and so when I come to singing it, Handel is fantastic at writing for the bass, and specifically for someone like me who's sort of, I'm not super low, I'm not super high, I never really call myself a baritone, never call myself a bass, so, you know, I've chosen the moniker of bass baritone, and he has this great ability to allow you know, phrases that send themselves down to really kind of allow you to churn those notes out exactly in the way that you want to. The thing that I particularly adore about singing Handel in the Handel Festival is that we work with the Handel Orchestra, who are all playing on their Baroque instruments, and there's this kind of glorious sound where the sound of a Baroque instrument isn't that sustained quality that you get in a symphony orchestra, where it's really, really long and you're having to constantly smash out sound in order to be heard over the top of it. There's a lot more play and a lot more nuance that one can find within the sound world. So there are moments with that sort of orchestra where you can really back off, and there's plenty of times, because one's conducted by someone like Lawrence, who's so understanding and frequently conducting from the harpsichord. So he's one of the team. He's not standing out directing people and telling them what to do. He's right there with you. So you're all breathing together. You're all making music together, and so you can play a lot. And if you're really into your text, into the story, then then hopefully you can kind of bring everybody along with you, and the orchestra can come with you because they're a small force group like that. You can really tell a new story every single time.
Yeah, definitely. And Nathan, what advice would you give?
In terms of advice, I would say use as many colours on your palette as possible. So, going along with what Ed said, the wonderful thing about Handel's writing is that you can really take risks and be as delicate as you can possibly be, and then on the other hand, really be quite strident with your approach at another point, and that will give real dynamic contrast, which I think is the key. It really is the key to making an interesting performance, and also absolutely be guided by the text, because, as we were saying, Handel writes so beautifully. He sets music so beautifully to the text, and also writes so wonderfully for the voice, that you can't, if you're true to the text and you try your best to simply put that across, actually you're most of the way there. But also play with it. Don't be afraid to play with it. Really enjoy those real extremes, and finding as much beauty in it as you can. But also there will be times when actually you want sarcasm as well, or something completely different, and really go to town on it, because actually Handel really, I think absolutely that's what he was intending.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've just had one more kind of addition to that. I mean, do you think that the Messiah itself, this is from Samir, is going to last another 300 years?
It could do. I mean, it's one of those wonderful pieces that, as we've said, gets performed an awful lot by everybody. And so, in terms of the UK performances, every single choral society performs it over and over, which is wonderful. And long may that continue. It's certainly, in the 25 years or so that I've been performing it, it still feels fresh. It still feels like there's different things that one can do with the piece, just in terms of the pure musical performance of it, but also, as we're proving on Monday, fingers crossed, that there are different ways that one can perform it. Here we're going to be doing it with 600 different members of a choir, which is you could never do in real life. So how wonderful that we're getting a chance to do that, and it's still the final product will be extraordinary and will be the Messiah that we know it, but we'll also have used amazing amounts of technology. And who's to say that in another 10, 20 years or something we can come up with another great idea whereby we could do different orchestras or different soloists from all around the world, or whatever it might be. There's so many different things that one can do with this music, and I think it will continue to stand the test of time. I think people will always want to come back to it.
Nathan, what do you think?
Oh, I think without a doubt we'll still be performing this in 300 years' time. I think, I won't be, of course. But yes, I think without a doubt. I think I'm going to go back to my sort of analogy earlier, which was, as long as people enjoy listening to that favourite album, then there will be a place for Handel's Messiah. Because I think the wonderful thing about it is it touches people in all sorts, in different ways, and we all have, these moments that we really connect with, and I think that will always be the case, because Handel just had this wonderful ability to sort of connect to the soul. So I think, yeah, absolutely. I think this will continue to be hugely popular for many years to come.
And there's nothing else quite like it, is there? I think that's the thing, is that there are passions, and there are Elijahs, and there are other performances and pieces that people have written over the intervening 300 years. But I don't know, there's something wonderful and classic about the Messiah, about the way it's constructed, about the story, which of course is timeless anyway. I don't think anyone's written a piece that has become anywhere near as popular. And maybe someone will. Of course somebody might. But I don't think that it could ever really fully take the place of the Messiah as being,
be as far-reaching
oratorio. Yeah, who knows?
And then, looking kind of, suppose, past, just the Messiah. I mean, how do you think the arts are going to cope with moving out of lockdown? Hopefully, within the next, month or 2 or 3.
Well, everybody that I know, everybody that I chat to, is so desperate to get back into the theatre as an audience member or as a performer. I think there's going to be an extraordinary explosion at some point, hopefully very soon, of people zooming back in. I mean, how the companies and the theatres are going to actually recover is beyond me, because they're the huge loss of income and no doubt the loss of people, because plenty of people will have had to have moved into other spheres in order to support themselves and their families. So there's going to be a great big rejig of how it works and who's going to be the successes and the failures coming out of it all. But I think in terms of the music making, the moment that people can get back into theatres, they will. So I've got some neighbours here who have been absolutely so desperate to get back into theatre. They're big opera fans, and they every single opportunity they've had over this period, they've engaged with everything that they can on their computer. They've bought tickets already to every summer festival that they can find this coming summer, and they're whenever we see them over the fence, they're desperately asking if we know anything else that they might be able to go and see. And I think that would be... Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? And I think that will be a story told across the land. Everyone's desperate to go and hear stuff, and so fingers crossed there'll be a huge explosion of it all.
Definitely. Nathan, what do you think?
Well, I'm in complete agreement with Ed there. I think yes, this has been a hugely worrying time for the arts and of course all other different areas, but I do think that people are more hungry than ever to hear music, but live music as well, to be in that space, to have that collective experience of live performance. I think people have really missed it, and I think everyone will be really hungry to get back to those theatres, to those churches, concert halls, and experience it again. And I think, yes, it's been a really sort of difficult time, but I think hopefully now, fingers crossed, we can start to really look forward to a much brighter future as far as the arts are concerned.
I never realised quite how important it was to get dressed up in order to have a night out to go to, and the prospect of at some point in the next few months being able to put on a suit or a concert dress, my tail suit, whatever it might be, and then step out the door and go to a place in order to watch a concert. I can't wait. In comparison to wearing shorts and a t-shirt in my own living room, it's just not quite the same.
Are you saying you'll be wearing tails to go and watch a concert?
Absolutely.
You'll be so
just because I can.
And in terms of that, with anticipation for these concerts and performances, what have you got planned, and what are you looking forward to singing? Obviously, aside from the Messiah on the 5th of April.
Well, I've got some Aces and Galatea performances coming up with the Buxton Festival in July, which should be fantastic, and it would be a great opportunity to get back into the rehearsal room and put something on its feet. And it's a piece that I've known and loved for many years now, so I'm looking forward to singing that again. Then it's still, so many things are still up in the air. It's so strange having, a year ago I used to know exactly what my diary would look like for, 3 months or 6 months or something. There would still be a little bit of movement, but essentially you knew roughly what was going on. Now I have no real hold on what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. In theory, I'm doing the opera that I was supposed to do in Germany next year instead. So we're going to rehearse it again in October, and then hopefully we're going to perform it in November and December. But I don't really know. But certainly I'm be amazed if I see any form of contract until day before I'm actually due to start. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Let's see.
I have like Ed. It's a difficult time in terms of planning for the future at the moment. But at the moment, I have some concerts in the diary which should be hopefully taking place because they're later in the year and they're also in the UK. So that hopefully will happen. But also, I've taken the opportunity. I have a connection with Nimbus Records, and I record a disc or two a year with them, song discs. So we've taken this opportunity to put some recording dates in the diary. Well, whilst we know that not much else is going to be happening. So actually, it's I'm very lucky to be able to have those projects in the diary. But in terms of live performance, I think I'm certainly a little way off yet in terms of, sort of having a busy diary, shall we say?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that kind of leads quite nicely. We've got another question from Maurice. He says, having discussed future semi-digital ways of performing and sharing music, is there something you would like to do that has never been possible without digital possibilities?
Interesting question. I'm completely fascinated by the way that Monday's performance is going to work in terms of, now that I know that all of the choruses basically have been recorded and are now in the hands of the technicians who will be putting it together with the orchestra. I think that's absolutely fascinating, and I have no doubt that it's going to lead to an amazing result for the people watching it at home. That kind of innovative performance I think is wonderful, and I wonder whether we're going to see an awful lot more of that. Certainly some of the most amazing opera performances that I've been to myself over the last few years have involved somehow using a camera on stage to film the things that are being sung and then to project it out into the audience, so we can see things that are happening on the stage and also see things that are happening on a screen at the same time, all within the same room. And I wonder whether there's going to be some sort of scope for doing that a lot more. People doing, I don't know, opera performances at home, sort of through Zoom, but better. So I could be here performing my character and film it, in my own house version of a set. And I wonder, and while my colleague is doing that in their own house, and somehow we're interacting, I think that there's so many possibilities with the digital age that could be done and had never really bothered to be explored. But now there's that necessity. I think that there's going to be some great innovation coming.
I suppose that's, I wouldn't say benefit, but the one thing that's come out of this is, it's made people change the way that they
we've had to, haven't we?
And showcase music in good and bad in different ways.
We've also had to become sort of experts at the sort of home studio thing, and we've certainly that's a real positive, that we've all become sort of slightly better at that. If I'm being completely honest, I think I'm actually longing for the sort of the being in a room with people again, and that's something I'm really excited about. But I also, this project is just fantastic. We're in a situation where we have choirs, singers from all over the world involved in this project. How could we do this without the wonders of modern technology? With simply, we couldn't put all these people in the same room. It would be too expensive. So that in itself is fantastic, and I think that will probably continue. That sort of mix of live and pre-recorded movements, and I think that's fantastic. I think that's really good, and I think that can make for really interesting productions and concerts. I also think, to a point, it has its limitations as well at the moment, in terms of doing. I mean, for instance, I'd love the idea of putting on a recital. It's very hard to put on a song recital, for instance, if you don't have a venue. It can be quite expensive, and it's a lot of work, you know. But actually, something like being able to just put it straight online is a fantastic thing, you know, and being able to just send it across the world, you know, from your living room. That is brilliant. So that's something I think that individually people will be doing more of as well, which I think is a real positive.
Yeah, and getting that international reach is important, which, you know, as we sort of said before, we wouldn't have got before. I mean, we've had singers from all over the world submit, which is fantastic. And where else would you get that? Because they wouldn't be able to travel for the live performance.
This seems to me to be one of the few projects that in some ways is better, you know, using this technology and with this setup, it's somehow better or more exciting, more interesting than the normal performance. You know, at least in terms of how many people are involved and the wonderful different things we're going to be able to see as part of the performance on Monday. Versions that are simply, you know, put on a concert in exactly the same way that you were going to, and then video it. They're never going to match up to the gloriousness of being in the room. And I've tried to engage with bits of online media, and it's never quite taken me to the same place that actually being in the concert hall with the performance has done. Maybe it's just because of the quality of my speakers, I don't really know. There's nothing quite like it as being there. But maybe this is because we couldn't emulate this in real life. So this platform can only work through some form of a screen, and that is therefore really interesting.
And also perhaps then, because like you say, you can't sort of recreate that, but we then get the best of both worlds. You know, we have the live performance, but also then we're able to put all these people together. You know, and that's fantastic. I mean, it's very exciting.
Yeah, it's very unique, and I think maybe possibly the only group doing it, which is really fantastic. Well, I mean, look, we've pretty much run out of time, and I think that's everybody's questions. This has been really fantastic, guys. Thank you so much. We're very excited that you'll be joining us and performing on Monday. Hopefully we'll have a great crowd listening. This will be posted on the Facebook group and on YouTube if anybody wants to catch up afterwards. But in the meantime, let's all just give a huge thanks to Ed and Nathan for giving up their time. And thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Thanks
Look forward to singing with you all on Monday.
Amazing. If I could all ask you to gracefully leave, don't all disappear at once. And thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you all on Monday.